Supply chain management, decision phases, and strategic sourcing. Decision phases can be defined as the different stages involved in supply chain management for taking an action or decision related to some product or service. Successful supply chain management requires decisions on the flow of information, product, and funds that fall into 3 decision phases. Here we will be discussing the 3 main decision phases involved in the entire process of the supply chain. The 3 phases are described below. Supply chain strategy. In this phase, the decision is taken by the management mostly. The decision to be made considers the sections like long-term prediction and involves the price of goods that are very expensive if it goes wrong. It is very important to study the market conditions at this stage. These decisions consider the prevailing and future conditions of the market. They comprise the structural layout of the supply chain. After the layout is prepared, the tasks and duties of each is laid out. All the strategic decisions are taken by the higher authority or the senior management. These decisions include deciding manufacturing the material, factory location, which should be easy for transporters to load material and to dispatch at their mentioned location, location of warehouses for storage of completed product or goods, and many more. Supply chain planning. Supply chain planning should be done according to the demand and supply view. In order to understand customers' demands, a market research should be done. The second thing to consider is awareness and updated information about the competitors and strategies used by them to satisfy their customer demands and requirements. As we know, different markets have different demands and should be dealt with a different approach. This phase includes it all, starting from predicting the market demand to which market will be provided the finished goods to which plant is planned in this stage. All the participants or employees involved with the company should make efforts to make the entire process as flexible as they can. A supply chain design phase is considered successful if it performs well in short-term planning. Supply chain operations. The third and last decision phase consists of the various functional decisions that are to be made instantly within minutes, hours, or days. The objective behind this decisional phase is minimizing uncertainty and performance optimization. Starting from handling the customer order to supplying the customer with that product, everything is included in this phase. For example, imagine a customer demanding an item manufactured by your company. Initially, the marketing department is responsible for taking the order and forwarding it to production department and inventory department. The production department then responds to the customer demand by sending the demanded item to the warehouse through a proper medium, and the distributor sends it to the customer within a time frame. All the departments engaged in this process need to work with an aim of improving the performance and minimizing uncertainty. Strategic sourcing. Strategic sourcing can be defined as a collective and organized approach to supply chain management that defines the way information is gathered and used so that an organization can leverage its consolidated purchasing power to find the best possible values in the marketplace. We cannot build up the significance of operating in a collaborative manner. Several decades have witnessed a major transformation in the profession of supply chain, from the purchasing agent comprehension, where staying in repository was the criterion, to emerging into a supply chain management surrounding, where working with cross-functional and cross-location teams is important to achieve success. Strategic sourcing is organized because of the necessity of some methodology or process. It is collective because one of the most essential necessities for any successful strategic sourcing attempt is of receiving operational components, apart from the procurement, engaged in the decision-making and assessment process. The process of strategic processing is a step-by-step approach. There are 7 distinct steps engaged in the process of strategic processing. These steps are explained below in brief. Understanding the spend category. The first 3 steps involved in the strategic sourcing are carried out by the sourcing team. In this first stage, the team needs to do a complete survey on the total expenditure. The team ensures that it acknowledges every aspect regarding the spend category itself. The 5 major regions that are analyzed in the first stage are as follows. Complete previous expenditure records and volumes. Expenditures divided by items and sub-items. Expenditures by division, department or user. Expenditures by the supplier. Future demand projections or budgets. For example, if the classification is groove packaging at a customer goods company, the team has to acknowledge the description of the classification, application patterns, and the reason behind specification of particular types and grades specified. Stakeholders at all functioning units and physical locations are to be determined. The logistics, for instance, needs an updated report regarding the transportation specifications and marketing requirements to acknowledge some quality or environmentally applicable features. Supplier market assessment. The second step includes frequent assessment of the supplier market for pursuing substitute suppliers to present incumbents. A thorough study of the supplier marketplace dynamics and current trends is done. The major element of the key product's design is should cost. Along with it, an analysis on the major suppliers' sub-tier marketplace and examination for any risks or new opportunities are also important. Now, it is not recommended to analyze the should cost for every item. There are many instances where conservative strategic sourcing techniques tend to work better. But in the instances where the application of strategic sourcing is not applicable, the should cost analysis supplies a valuable tool that drives minimizing of cost and regular progress efforts of the supplier. Supplier survey. The third step is developing a supplier analysis for both incumbent and potential substitute suppliers. This analysis assists in examining the skills and abilities of a supplier. In the meanwhile, data collected from incumbent suppliers are used for verifying the spend information that suppliers have from their sales systems. The survey team considers the above-mentioned areas for gathering information. The areas are as follows: feasibility, capability, maturity, capacity. The analysis is done to examine the potential and skills of the market to satisfy the customer demands. This analysis helps in the examination done at the initial stage to find out if the proposed project is feasible and can be delivered by the identified supply base. This analysis also supplies an initial caution of the customer demands to the market and enables suppliers to think about how they would react to and fulfill the demand. Here the motto is to motivate the appropriate suppliers with the right structural layout to respond to the demands. Building the strategy. The fourth step comprises constructing the sourcing strategy. The merger of the first three steps supports the necessary elements for the sourcing strategy. For every region or category, the strategy depends on answering the questions given below. How willing is the marketplace to oppose the supplier? How supportive are the clients of a firm for testing incumbent supplier relationships? What are the substitutes to the competitive assessment? Generally, these substitutes are opted when a purchasing firm has little leverage over its supply base. They will depend on the belief that the suppliers will share the profits of a new strategy. Thus, we say that the sourcing strategy is an accumulation of all the drivers thus far mentioned. RFX request. Mostly, the competitive approach is applied in general cases. In this approach, a request for proposal or bid needs to be prepared, for example, RFP request for proposal, RFQ request for quotation, ITT invitation for tender. For most spend classifications or groups, this defines and clarifies all the needs for all pre-qualified suppliers. The request should comprise product or service specifications, delivery and service requirements, assessment criteria, pricing structure, and financial terms and conditions. In the fifth stage, an interaction plan needs to be executed to allure maximum supplier interest. It must be ensured that each and every supplier is aware that they are competing on a level playing field. After sending the RFP to all suppliers, it is to be confirmed that they are given enough time to respond. In order to motivate a greater response, follow-up messages should also be sent. Selection. This step is all about selecting and negotiating with suppliers. The sourcing team is advised to apply its assessment constraints to the responses generated by the suppliers. If information across the limitation of RFP response is required, it can be simply asked for. If done correctly, the settlement process is conducted first with a larger set of suppliers and then shortlisted to a few finalists. If the sourcing team utilizes an electronic negotiation tool, large number of suppliers can sustain in the process for longer duration, giving more wide suppliers a better opportunity at winning the enterprise. Communication with new suppliers. After informing the winning suppliers, they should be invited to take part in executing recommendations. The execution plans vary according to the scale of switches the supplier makes. For obligatory purposes, a communication plan will be set up, including any modification in specifications and improvements in delivery, service, or pricing models. These tend to be communicated to users as well. As we know, the company gains immensely from this entire process of creating a communication plan, making some modifications according to the customer demand, and further forwarding this to the customer. It's essential that this process should be acknowledged by both the company and the supplier. For new suppliers, we need to construct a communication plan that copes with the alteration from old to new at every point in the process engaged by the spend category. The sections that have an impact of this change are the department, finance and customer service. In addition, the risk antennae will be particularly sensitive during this period. It is essential to gauge closely the new supplier's performance during the first weeks of performance. Another essential task is to grasp the intellectual capital of the sourcing team, which has been developed within the 7-step process, so that it can be used the next time that category is sourced.